Jason or Dylan. Thank you for starting the recording. Looks like we have everyone here, so we'll go ahead and call to order the Community Development Council Committee and Council Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, July 5th. I hope everyone had a safe and happy 4th of July. I certainly enjoyed the red, white, and boom fireworks yesterday. Those were very good this year. Thank you, everyone that was involved in that. For the record, we have everyone here on the committee. Plus, additionally, we have Mayor Ross, Council Member Christensen, and staff members as well. Can't tell who's in the council chambers, so we'll go ahead and just leave it at that for the electeds involved. Let's see. I don't have my attendees open. So this time we'll ask any citizens wishing to have comments on items not on the agenda. And I don't see any attendees. Is there anyone in council chambers that is there to speak?
No.
Okay. We'll move ahead then. Next time on the agenda is minutes for February 7th. Wait, I'm on the wrong one. Sorry. Yep, there's no, I'm jumping around. I was on the wrong list, sorry. So do I have approval of agenda? Any of, I guess, how do we say that? Barring no objection, the agenda is approved. Next item is the approval of minutes for both March 7th and May 16th. Council members, any comments on the agenda on the meeting minutes of March 7th? I have one. My apologies for not sending this earlier, but I missed it when I was looking at it over the weekend. But under also present, I do not believe it's our practice to list individual citizens as being present at the meetings, as others may have been present online or in remote locations. So I'd like to strike Sherilyn Lux and Richard Scheel as being present at the meeting. Yeah. They're both noted in public comments, but I do not believe they should be listed as attending.
If you'd like, we can, excuse me, we can simply strike those and you can take them as approved with those adjustments. Or if you'd like us to bring them back, we can do that as well.
No, I think if there's no other comments, I think that's just strike them and consider it approved. Okay, hearing no comments, let's go ahead and go that route. And then approval of minutes for May 16th. I had no comments on that meeting. Okay. Moving right along. Agenda Bill 22-070, Historic Downtown Relook Code Amendments. Jason or Dylan, do you have a presentation for us tonight?
Yes, Dylan will handle this. So I'll let him approach the podium here.
Hello. Let me get set up real quick and then I'll make a quick presentation about this. I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to apologize ahead of time. I know there's a camera here. I'm going to be looking there and on a computer. I'll do my best to try to split my attention appropriately. Okay. And you all can see this. Yes, looks so. Okay, here's the agenda bill. Okay, so I want to first explain that I went back through this agenda bill, and whenever we made call outs to specific minutes or agendas, I went and added them as a link so that way people could track the progress over time. I recognized that as I was working through the agenda, it was getting quite unwieldy. So that's what that is. I hope that's helpful. Another detail, and this is moving straight on to the document in question, is that unlike the last time you reviewed this concept, it was not in an ordinance form at that time. So this is the structured ordinance form. Included within it are a lot of details about how the city adopts ordinances and things like that, but it also includes the same materials from the previous document, which I believe I was calling a track changes worksheet or summary. I'd have to go back to make sure I got my terminology right, but generally speaking, this is the same materials, just formatted appropriately for an ordinance. Another detail that's kind of part of this is that we had a lot of track changes over the course of a lot of public meetings, and it was getting very complicated and very cumbersome, and translating them from that former document to this new format was not working very well. The amount of track changes plus the structure difference is making it unwieldy to essentially model as we are going to have for council. So this document here does not show the same level of track changes that you would have seen in the previous document as well. If you recall, it had things like the blue highlighting was from this meeting and red highlighting was from that meeting. And I tried to show more attention about which items were being changed. This one's more of this is what is the most up-to-date proposal at this time, so to speak. With respects to that, there has been changes since the CDC meeting last. The primary focus of this changes is to, one, have a more thorough review by our city's legal department to overlook the document and make sure that there is no major concerns in terms of grammatical fit with the styling that our code language is written, as well as how the modifications would look. In addition to that, there has been a couple of changes to, I want to see if I could quickly find it. And there's in the fence standards, there's just some incorrect call outs to architectural standards. So that was just removed out of speed there, just because it was an inaccurate reference. Along with that, from the CDC's comments, there was a kind of more broad request to consolidate the upper section here to reduce the amount of times that the CD director is called out specifically to weigh in on each and every item, and instead we pulled that away with legal teamwork there, and kind of rewrote the section to better reflect the comments made from that meeting. So we tightened down the amount of times director is used as a judgment call and made it more sternly worded so that it was more shalls, more specific about what the requirements would be, less if feasible then this. And we just tried to tighten up the language so that it was more clear that when the planning commission is reviewing a document, it's more concisely interpreted. Same thing goes with some call outs to a section I have here, which referenced, if I recall correctly, some less than tight parameters for what architectural standards would be. And instead we redirected them to chapter 1735 210J. That's architectural standards in the historic district. So more of a direct reference rather than a broad appeal to architectural standards of the Historic Design Review Board. I believe that that captures most, if not all, of the comments. I would just like to say that in the review with legal, we found a lot of opportunities where sentences could be, simplified, made easier to read, changed a word or two. So those types of changes have been made, but nothing that dramatically or even not even significant at all. The word I'm looking for is very insignificant changes were made for readability, essentially. I'll go ahead and pause there because I feel like we're all probably very familiar with this document, and so I want to pause my dialogue.
Take a breath. It's okay.
Yeah, thank you.
I can't see people's hands. Hold on here. All right. I'd like to have the time here now that we've we've been through this once before. I know it's been a long time coming. We had the joint session with the Planning Commission previously. We now have the actual changes resident in the code. I think there's a couple things I have three things actually that I'd like to have us talk about. And maybe I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot, Councilmember Johnson. But you were a part of the Planning Commission during the time that a lot of this review was being done. I'd like to give you the first opportunity to speak to the agenda bill if you so choose.
Oh, thank you. I don't have any comment on it at this time. I've had about a year and a half, 2 years of comment on it. But thank you.
No problem. Maybe feel free to either raise your hand or chime in here as we're going through it.
Yeah.
Councilor Mayhew, do you have any comments at this time?
I do not.
Okay. I have a few things. One thing's more of a formatting item for you, Dylan. Minor thing, and I know you were trying to get all these edits taken care of. Section 3 under the landscaping 17.35420. If you scroll down to item E, you'll see item E was deleted, but then the next one, F and G, weren't revised to be replacing E and then F. I don't know if that's important, and H I guess comes after that too. But normally, if we eliminate a whole section, we would renumber the sections following or indicate not used. Just something to clean up before we bring it in front of council.
Perfect. Thank you.
I know it's the architect in me. I find those little errors. I can't help it.
No, thank you.
The other item is something I wanted to have a discussion, and Mayor, please, would like your impressions on this too. I think the Planning Commission should be applauded for hanging in there on this. We assigned this to the Planning Commission in December. I think it was December or so of 2018. So they made it through COVID and got through this. I think the two items that I want to have a little bit of discussion about, because it's now in front of council, is I do like the idea of the amenity regulations on the street use. I think if you're going to scroll through this under the ones where it has where you've got pick my spot here, the street furniture and his streetscape amenity regulations, where you need to obtain 2 points essentially for the amenities for type 1 and type 2 projects being exempt. And there we go, that's the one. The one that caught my attention is that I'm concerned that every single project is either going to put in a trash can or a bicycle rack in front of their building, and then every 40 feet, or in some cases every 30 feet, depending on how if you're it could be every 25 feet, we're going to have trash cans and bicycle racks, and I think that's a little excessive. What I'd like to get the committee's input on, and we'll motion this, or we can determine which way we go within the council discussion, is there probably needs to be some sort of a tracking mechanism for the community development director to note that as some of these sites are either redeveloped or improved or whatever happens, we don't end up with only trash cans and bike racks, that they do special paving patterns, or they do artwork, and do things that will be, community improvements. I was downtown in Pioneer Square today at my office and walking along, and took a look at how often there are trash cans on the street, and it's pretty much every street corner. So if you use Seattle as an example, that's what, a couple 100 feet, 300 feet, I think, is a standard Seattle, and we've got it here as every 50 linear feet of sidewalk. That seems a little bit too much. what does everybody think? And Mayor included, in terms of, do we need to address this in either a record keeping process, or do we need to consider that dimensional, it's on item number B, if you scroll down, 2B, that we look at, there maybe needs to be some different dimensioning numbers here.
If I put my hand in front of my face, can you see it? I don't know.
I
There.
can't even, you're so small on the screen, I can't even see it, but go ahead, Joe.
Oh, I thank you. Yeah, on item number 2 there, what it says on the streetscape amenities is that the community development director will maintain a list of existing amenities to determine the appropriate number and type of streetscape features. So I think that we did talk about that. I don't think we did. We did talk about that quite extensively. How do we make sure that we don't just have a bunch of bike racks downtown? And this was the solution that was proposed by staff. Is the community development director would maintain that list, and then when one of these amenities was proposed by a developer of some kind, that the community development director would kind of review what we already have to avoid that very problem. I was personally satisfied with that solution. I will also just note that we at first, when we were first looking at this process, we were thinking a lot about Front Street, because that's kind of, the main face of downtown is Front Street. Why did I say that? We're on Issaquah. Railroad Avenue, because that's kind of the main face. But as we, over the weeks, all kind of took turns, just going down and walking around, we noticed it's full of stuff and it looks amazing. We don't need to add a bunch of stuff to Railroad Avenue, but it was more on the other side with Falls Avenue and just a couple other spots that we were more concerned with, that were missing some of the these other kinds of amenities. And I will say that Commissioner Lambert went through and counted all of the bicycle racks and determined that, in his opinion, we had enough bicycle racks as it was. So anyway, I hope that satisfies you, but if not, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it further.
Yeah, and I saw that there. I was thinking of it. It still leaves it a little vague, and that's why I was wondering, because as an architect, if I was developing and I saw that, so community director will maintain a list of existing amenities and determine the appropriate number. Well, why does somebody else get one and I don't? I'm gonna. Let's say I'm representing the developer of a parcel of land on the corner of where the gravel parking lot is, and I'm submitting my project, and somebody tells me, well, Railroad Avenue has enough trash cans and bicycle racks, you got to do something else. Why do I get singled out to have to do something else when they didn't have to do something else? And so I agree that there should be something else, but I'm just trying to figure. I'm in my head, I'm going, coming up with arguments on how I could on behalf of my client get away with doing a trash can and a bike rack, and you wouldn't be able to stop me. And so I almost feel like we should remove those two items as options on amenities. That a bike rack is, I mean, I think it's, and correct me if I'm wrong, I've not been deep into the code, but I believe bike racks are required for public parking for a business that is being newly developed. And you're right, there are plenty of trash receptacles actually on both streets and the side street there as well. Whether it's on, I'm drawing a blank on my streets now. Anyway, all the way down to Newton even, it seems like there's enough in that sense, even though that's not an historic district, I understand that. But I'm almost considering that we should eliminate those two items, that they are just common items that would be an easy way for somebody to try to escape the applying of amenity points to their project. Any thoughts on, did that come up within the planning commission's work?
It did, and I think that we just erred on the side of making sure that there would be trash receptacles and bicycle racks, just to avoid the problem of there being none. But I do hear your argument for sure. So I just wonder if there's any way to make sure that those order, if it's already in the code somewhere else that's not right here, that just guarantees there would still be, years down the road, as redevelopment occurs, there would still be trash receptacles and bicycle racks. It looks like Mr. Gamble might have an answer to that. Also, the mayor had her hand up.
Oh, I can't. Sorry, Mayor, I can't see I can't see your hand if you actually raise your hand. I can't see you.
You see that?
Those of us that remote can
I think it means the Zoom
Okay.
raise hand.
Oh, yeah, I can do that. My hand's up.
there, Mayor Ross.
Thank you. So I'm curious, when does it come down to picking these amenities? Is it when they're through a permitting process?
Mhm.
Is that
Ye-
correct?
Yeah, so as, for example, we have, there's like a development that we're having in downtown. It would go through historic design review. They'd have to demonstrate that they're achieving all the requirements of the historic design review code. And it will be reviewed by the planning commission. So in that package of review of their historic design review process, they would have to indicate the appropriate amenities where they'd be placed. And in this case, if nothing changed, then they would have to pick from this list or generate an idea on their own, because it does leave room for that. And the director would make sure that there's not too many. In this case, is what would happen.
So they have to identify it and you have to approve it.
We would,
CD does.
CD director would approve just the amenity at this moment, but not necessarily the whole package. The whole package would get approved by planning commission.
Right, but so we won't have 10 trash cans. You'll say, nope, we already have one
Right.
50 feet down. So what's left is either some art or a bench, or
Or come
I
up with
do
something.
recall the long conversations about clocks, but I think,
Yes.
but that is not on there.
Yes.
There's no reason why you don't want hundreds of clocks.
That's right.
Okay, so I feel like it's taken care of through the permitting process then.
The challenge, I think, if I can lend my experience is that it's done there in the permitting process, but that's often needs to be decided much earlier in the design process. So I don't know if it's possible to somehow have that be a pre-application checklist item, which is getting way in the weeds here for my fellow council members and mayor, but that's something that, because if I'm submitting for my permit and I've submitted my drawings and then I'm told that I can't have a trash can or a bike rack and I've got to do special paving patterns, that's a lot of work to change at the time at which you're submitting for permit. So is that, I guess, can you maybe Dylan
Mhm.
and or Jason, if you guys can clarify, so
Yeah.
and the timing of when someone would actually find out, because I'm hearing that it's at permit, but that seems to be really late in the process.
So with regards to when they would find out, in ideal situations, they'd find out at a PAR meeting, like you said. And if the code were to be changed, we would need to look back at the PAR checklist, which is, for those of you who don't know, a pre-application meeting where we meet with the developer. They show us kind of what their ideas are, and we make sure that the land use is appropriate, that their design is including some of the things that always crash into walls, like walls, or landscaping can be a big one. Parking can also be another big one. So we walk through kind of like in a very early, we're not in the weeds yet kind of situation. And that would be an ideal moment to have a conversation about amenities. So that would and should be done. Another aspect of that is that the PAR meeting has a lot of stuff going on in it. We usually write up a big report and we'll say, these are the kinds of things based on your questions that we are concerned with. We would enlist that in that PAR report. Insofar as another step that's in between that, the PAR report isn't binding yet. The historic design review standards, once planning commission has approved that becomes the first somewhat binding step that we have in this process. But the PAR is a very effective public or developer engagement tool that is heavily used here in the city.
Councilmember Mayhew.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm following the conversation. Is the concern that we don't want multiple businesses choosing B and D, choosing a trash receptacle and a bicycle rack? That we don't want everyone just taking that particular pair of choices and just doing it over and over? Or am I misunderstanding the concern? Or is it just, no, we don't want too many bicycle racks, or we don't want too many trash receptacles? I'm sure not tracking what the actual or what our specific concern is.
It's well, it's the way you restated it in a different way than you stated first. So that's kind of both. If I'm answering the second part of that.
Okay, so
yeah,
we might be worried that there's too many bicycle racks.
too many bicycle racks,
And-
too many trash cans.
I got you. Okay, thank you.
And how to then, and then the idea that the concept here is that it's then governed by the community development director. And that then becomes I guess, a less specific way to do it than other than just saying, the community development director will tell you if you need a trash can or tell you if you have to do a bike rack, that sort of thing. So Councilor Meehan.
Yeah, so if I'm tracking this, then I would just be concerned that we put our community development director in a kind of an unfair position. So maybe if we could, and I think maybe this is where you were at the very beginning, is maybe you could just add to both item B, which is the trash receptacles, which already has something like this, and then you could add it to D as well, and you could just put, no closer than every 100 linear feet, or whatever number you want to put in there, and then that would give the community development director something to point to, say, sorry, you're within 30 feet of the other one, so you're gonna have to pick something different. So maybe we just add that in to both item B and D, which seems to be where our concern is, and just say, well, B sort of already has it, which says, may not be placed, closer than 80 feet or whatever our number is.
Dylan?
I suppose this will slightly derail from that comment, but I was just going to note that if we removed B and D, it wouldn't necessarily limit their usage. It just would mean that the developer wouldn't be picking it from the list provided. They could still come up with it on their own. If they see a need, they could present it as an option. The twist side of that is that we were presenting options that were maybe not going to be considered by a developer, I think is the intent of this list. In so far as tightening up the language to achieve it, I don't see any concerns with that outside. It becomes that code language issue where you start to add a lot of qualifiers and details, and we're always trying to avoid that as best we can, but that's my only comment.
Councilor Mayhew?
Yeah, just to make sure I understood Mr. Gamble's comment, could we just scroll up just a tad? Oh, but desired amenities include but are not limited to. So maybe Mr. Gamble's suggestion of just taking item B and item D off the list doesn't disqualify them, it just doesn't suggest them anymore. Would that just solve the problem?
I think that's kind of where I was headed. And then to counteract that because it does say, but not limited to, do we add an additional one that says, or other items with prior approval from the community development director? And that gives that option. And that's common in a lot of codes to have that sort of thing. Councilmember Johnson, any thoughts on those things?
I would be fine with that if it makes sense to the community development staff.
Go ahead, Jason.
Go ahead. Let's go.
I see the mayor has her hand up, so.
Yeah, Mayor Ross.
Well, is it listed somewhere else that we're gonna have garbage cans then? I mean, my concern is now no one's gonna have garbage cans.
Yeah.
That's a different problem.
Well, typically, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to circumvent Jason or Dylan here, but typically cities prescribe those trash receptacles in the public right of way. Therefore, they're city maintained. So that was another part of my comment that I haven't brought up yet, that to provide a streetscape amenity and then putting in the public right of way, who owns it? Who has to maintain it? Who has to empty it? That's some of the questions that come about. So if you do have trash cans, is it the city staff that has to stop at every single one and empty it? Or is it waste management? Or is it the building owner? And then their argument is, well, I provided the amenity, but you didn't tell me how to maintain it.
In this case, it would be city staff that would, as it is now, the city staff manage and take care of all the trash receptacles placed in the public right of way, as there is no, well, first off, there is no section of our code that allows any private development to put trash cans in public right of way except for us. So right now they are us. And insofar as this would change it, it would still be that and I'll say Parks and Public Works Department or whoever the city designates to maintain that service. And presumably the community development director would make sure that that was a reasonable thing for the Parks and Public Works director. Is a given, but insofar as it's a good comment, I feel that's fair. The Planning Commission did review this concept pretty thoroughly, and they left it in, I can't remember the context. Do you by chance recall?
I think again, it was left in following on the mayor's comment. Just the fear that there wouldn't be any of these amenities if no one chose to put them in. So it's kind of like I don't know which side of the teeter-totter has the bigger kid on it, which way it's going to end up going, and how to find that balance. I think that again, the community development director having the list and being able to say, there's sure an awful lot of trash cans here, probably don't need any more, and then being able to talk to the developer about that early on sounds reasonable to me. And I think that's why we ended up going that way. Was the expectation was that the community development director and then in the final approving process, the planning commission having some level of oversight there would kind of take care of that issue. Well, anyway, that goes down a rabbit hole. Never mind. Yes. So I think that was the idea.
Okay. Well, I guess that's kind of where I'm wondering which way we should go, because it goes to that second comment I was going to come up with next, is that who maintains all these items, and that includes the planting, where it's got the option of adding some additional planters of moderate size. Well, who's maintaining those? Is somebody is the property owner supposed to irrigate them even though it's in the right of way? What happens if they get all full of weeds? Is that the city cleaning them out, or is it the landlord, or is it the building owner or the tenant? And so it just sort of adds up, and I'm just trying to make sure we've thought through all of those items. Mr. Rogers.
So to add a little bit of context to that, the issue of who's responsible for maintaining, who's responsible for maintaining items in the right of way, whether it's planter strips or things like that, has come up internally. Mr. Chambliss has brought it up, and so we're actively looking into this, and I believe it's probably the Parks and Public Works Committee will see something in the near future, but we're still working on it. So I think that conversation does factor into this as to, well, who is responsible? Because right now in the city's code, the right of way is the right of way and it belongs to the city and it's the city's responsibility. We don't have, like some other cities do, we don't have responsibility for sidewalks, planter strips, anything like that. Of course, you might recall there was the ordinance about snow removal from a couple of years ago, was kind of this city's first push in that direction of having adjacent property owners be responsible for elements within the right of way. So I think, certainly that conversation is going to continue from a slightly different standpoint, but, here, I think, so far what you've heard is that, the city would be emptying the trash bins. The planters, I think, just practically speaking right now will vary. If it's the city's planter, we're going to go water it. We're going to maintain it. If it's one of the businesses planters, they're probably going to be the ones maintaining it. I think certainly as you've heard, if any of these particular amenities are getting put in the street right of way, it's likely going to fall on city staff at the moment to provide the upkeep for it, which, and having private development provide public amenities within the street, whether it's a sidewalk or a planter box or a trash bin or anything else, is certainly not unprecedented. We do it all the time. And they become public amenities at that point, maintained by the city. So there, in that regard, we can certainly continue that. But how we move forward is absolutely an open question the council, I think, will be considering over the next few months.
So I guess what I just wanted to do here on these items is kind of bring that high level of we can go forward with this, but there are ramifications that have either take staff time or Parks and Public Works time or consideration that down the road there may need to be something that addresses that or how it goes about, right? So I'm just trying to lend some of my background in what I've found in multiple different cities of development, that these are the things that are going to come up. I've got one more comment on this that is of a different direction. So maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but I don't think we're under a time pressure to move this forward to council. Does staff want to have a chance to address some of these things before the next committee meeting, or in some way so it doesn't just linger, or how do we want to do it?
We could do it one of two ways. One being the kind of like we handled the minutes, where if it's a simple enough correction, then I can make it and turn it around easily. If it's a pretty substantial change, like last time, it would seem prudent to return it to CDC first before it moves on to council. So two choices. I think it depends on the severity of the corrections.
I guess I can interject, Chair. If this committee wanted to have further discussion around the maintenance and upkeep issue, it may be, it may be helpful to hold this for a bit and wait for the other ordinance about maintenance of adjacent property owners maintaining things moves into the Parks and Public Works Committee for review, because that discussion might help inform that particular aspect. Because right now we're obviously very focused on effectively just the downtown historic district and how this would affect, and what that would involve. But this other ordinance is certainly looking to apply more globally, and issues like this will have to be part of that discussion. So that is one option. As you also said, Chair, the committee could choose to move this forward as is or with some minor changes, and the maintenance upkeep issue will be an ongoing discussion. And because we can always make some additional changes. I think there is no particular time pressure to this, other than, as you noted, it's been in process for quite some time, and there's always an element of let's move some things through the process and get them done in one way or another. But we also don't need to do something just to do something. I think there's an element also of let's try to get things as right as we're going to get them, and not just push them through because we're tired of it. So I know that's not particularly, maybe it's not particularly helpful to identify all these things, but I think that's kind of where we stand with this, and we can look to the committee for some how do you want to approach it?
Councilor Mayhew, you had your hand up earlier. Did you have a comment?
Well, I was just looking for kind of a way forward. I think I wasn't clear if we were going to ask staff to do something. I just wasn't clear what we were asking them to do. I've sort of heard, the mayor's comment, which is, hey, if we take these items out, we run the risk that we don't get them anymore. And I thought that was a very valid comment. I've heard, comments from the two other council members about, well, we may get too many of them. I think that's a valid comment too. And so, I don't know, in my own mind, I don't know which of those comments is more valid. I sort of don't know where I'm at. So, I think we just ask staff to go back and think about it some more. My guess is they've thought about it a lot. They'll probably I'm not sure they'll change anything. So unless we can get clear on please change X, which I also thought I heard from staff of, look, if you want to take something out, or if you want to add some, limiting language, like, every 80 feet or something, they seem to be open to any of those. But I think if we're going to ask them to do something, we sort of owe it to them to say, here's what we want you to do. I think we ask them to think about it more, they're likely to say, well, we thought about it some more and we still have the same thought.
Mayor Ross.
I think Councilmember Johnson was before me.
Okay. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that Councilmember Mayhew's perspective is, I think I'm in agreement that if we're going to ask staff to do something, we have to have a specific ask for what it is we want them to look for. Personally, I think that this is fine as is, provided that down the road, there will be some clarification on responsibility for maintenance of these different amenities from Parks and Public Works. And if we would need to cite whatever that ordinance might be, or whatever code sections that might be in this at some point, if that makes sense, that they will be maintained by X, Y, and Z as laid out in code, whatever. Then perhaps it might be worth it to wait a little bit. If we don't need to necessarily say that because that's already in the code, then I think we could just move forward with this as it is, trusting the Community Development Director and the Planning Commission to sort out the specifics of the amenities.
Mayor Ross.
So I concur with Councilmember Johnson. And I think the Planning Commission did a really thorough review of this, and lots of conversations that I also sat through with them last year. And that's where the clock conversation came up, because they thought through every single amenity there. Maintenance, it doesn't matter how many trash cans we have or how many flowers we have, someone's going to maintain it, whether we decide it's the business owner or whether we decide it's the city. Some will have to maintain it. And so if that's in a different code, it's coming forward, it probably won't be in this code, it'll be in some other code that business owners and others will have to adhere to. So that'll be coming down the road. But I'm all for moving this forward and having council, if they have some further comments or discussion, that would be great. Thank you.
I think, and I appreciate that at some point, down the road, somebody's going to have to maintain it, or somebody's going to have to do the upkeep. I just, having represented, building owners and tenants for so many years, the response you're going to get from the community is, well, you didn't tell me that when I put it in. Now you're making me do it. I don't think I will. They're not going to run irrigation for the landscaping after the fact. And so I think it does need I think it falls into that. It's not in a hurry. And so if the ask is to have staff coordinate with the Parks and Public Works to consider maintenance of these things, because it does have an impact on on both staffing and the tasks that our staff need to go about on a day-to-day basis of those sorts. I mean, as it stands, it sits just fine if this is the way we want to go. But I think there's a missing item of maintenance, a missing item of I heard it said that right now under the code, building owners can't put something in the right of way, but now we're telling them that they can. So it's sort of conflicting with putting trash receptacles are the responsibility of the city, yet we're saying go ahead and put a trash receptacle out there. And I think that's just conflicting with whether it's responsible or not. And I think if the ask is, I'd like to have staff at the very least just take a time to coordinate it with Parks and Public Works on the maintenance and responsibility of the long-term care of it, considering that businesses could be sold to somebody else and no longer is the same person that owned it, that built it originally, that now owns it, and nobody will remember that they're responsible for it unless we codify it. So is that specifically vague enough?
If I can ask for clarification, or if I can just restate what I believe the ask is. Coordinate with the Parks and Public Works Director to confirm that the code as it's displayed here does not have any major heartburn with the way the city would and could operate for things like this, or to ask him in this case if he thinks some of these should not be on here for some reason. Those are the kind of two takeaways I got.
I think that's a good summary. I think it's unless somebody thinks that a proposal is going to come in the next 2 weeks or 4 weeks that's going to redevelop a large number of parcels in the historic district, I think it's worth the dot the i's and cross the t's, just for and that doesn't have to happen at a council level. That just happens at a staff level, and then let us know in the next community development. Yep, we got this covered. We're going to prepare language to cover maintenance of facility, owner provided facilities in the right of way, much like we did with the snow removal. And if that's the case, then then we can push it forward, and it's on its way. Councilmember Johnson.
I support the due diligence of making sure that all of the parties who need to be involved in this have communicated thoroughly with each other. So I'm fine with giving staff a couple of weeks to just check in and say, is this good as it is? With Parks and Public Works, that is. Is this clear enough? Or do we need to wait for these other potential code amendments to move through Parks and Public Works before we move forward? So I'm fine with waiting just a little bit longer.
It's only been 4 years. Councilmember Mayhew.
I support that as well.
Okay. Let's go that route. Thanks, Dylan and Jason, for your patience on that.
Can I ask one more question real fast?
Absolutely.
Just before we take off from this topic, my question is, I communicate with the Parks and Public Works Director, get feedback. He makes suggestions on a couple tweaks or changes. Would you like me to bring those changes in this format, like ready to go, or assuming that he would provide council approvable comments, so to speak? Or do you want me to kind of almost step it back and give you the option to disagree with his comments or not? I guess is my.
I think I'd like to see it come to committee and then go forward to council.
Okay. Understood.
So the last item I had, and I know we just spent a whole bunch of time on something really simple. We've got two definitions added to the section. I actually worked from the bottom to the top, if you didn't notice. I really appreciate that we've got now the downtown master plan and downtown vision plan added in as references. I think that helps a ton to knowing what the expectations are. The two definitions that have always sort of bothered me, and I'll if my fellow council members feel that it's just I'm way too far into the weeds, please say so. But is letter D and letter H, the contributing building or site and the non-contributing building or site, and I've always been troubled by how that's defined. That we sort of use these two definitions as establishing what is quote unquote good design. Of course, my computer wants to restart. No, we're going to postpone it for a while. Hold on. Okay. We use those two definitions to determine whether something's good design. And that typically in front of it'd be the design review board, or in this case, the historic preservation board, which is also acts as the design review board, which is the planning commission. And when I read these, I sort of look at it as it's a building or site, within the landmark district, as defined, which is of historical significance and has substantially retained its original appearance and is identified as such in a landmark designation report. So it's a series of ands. So in order, using my very limited knowledge of the legal tense, and mostly what Mr. Sturbanks taught me, is that if it says and, it has to have all of it. So what I'm concerned about is that we have this definition that says it has to be of historic significance, has to have substantially retained its appearance, and has to be identified in the landmark report. And I think what we may find is that there are buildings that are not in the landmark report that are significant, that do contribute to the character of our downtown historic district. Yet this definition would not include that. So I don't think I want to go down the path of changing this without going through the due diligence, and the due diligence would be something outside of this agenda bill. But I wanted to bring up that these two definitions sort of put us in a position of subjective, whether something is contributing or not contributing, because it's not really clear. Because the landmark designation report doesn't always include all that we would think are contributing, because something even new could be contributing to the downtown. Jason.
Thanks, Chair. I definitely hear what you're saying, because the language, you're right, there's a series of ands in there. And one thing we learned from the recent renovation, facade changes to what's now the Engel and Volkers business there on the corner of Railroad and River, is, that is technically a contributing structure per the landmark designation report. It has been very heavily modified over the years and does not retain all of its historic value. So that right there is an example of a building that it is a designated contributing structure in the designation report. And I will say that has, generally speaking, been the, how we ultimately determine, is it a contributing building or structure or not? Meaning, is it one of the, was it 20, I believe, 19 or 20 structures, buildings identified in the designation report. So that's kind of been the litmus test, so to speak. Is if it's one of the 20 identified, then it's a contributing structure. If it's not, then it's not. That said, we could certainly have a discussion about, is the definition appropriate? Are there other, because as you point out, that there are other buildings in the historic district that have historical significance that aren't necessarily contributing structures, but maybe they're well preserved at this point, where other structures are not. So maybe that's something useful to look at going forward in the future. It would be a bit tricky to look into now, so, of course. But just, like I said, just add the clarity is we consider contributing building to mean the 19 or 20 contributing structures identified in the landmark designation.
Councilmember Johnson.
Yeah, I think this kind of dovetails into questions about a lot of the code language around what the Historic Design Review Board uses when reviewing building permits and things, where there's some language that could probably be tightened up. There are questions about the list, as you mentioned already, as to what's contributing, what's not. That probably goes beyond at least in my estimation, goes beyond the scope of what we were trying to do here. But I definitely hear your concern around it. And I think that perhaps it might be worth the community development committee's time to review and maybe kick down to the planning commission to review on our behalf some of the language that's in the historic design review process. To tighten some of that up. I mean, there's just lots of stuff about, oh, well, the colors have to look nice. Here's a palette. You can choose from the palette or not. You know, so anyway, yeah, I definitely hear your concern. I don't know if this is the spot to make those kinds of corrections, though.
No, and it wasn't meant to be, and that's, we had, you know, it had the pulpit in the setting and said, okay, let's throw it in there, because it was a historic relook of the code. But I think it's something that probably, it doesn't get changed as part of this work that was assigned to the planning commission and moves forward, but it goes to that, exactly what you said, and referred to the historic design review board as well, as we saw in our last project that came through. There are some vague and sort of symbolic gestures to do certain things, but could be interpreted in many different ways. So I want to leave that comment there, and let's just say that's going to be considered, and we can add that to the parking lot list. And if we assemble a few more items, we can assign that. I think you're right. We assign it to the planning commission to investigate. Okay. So with that, I think the direction is for Agenda Bill 22070 to remain in committee with staff review of the maintenance responsibilities coordinated through Parks and Public Works of the amenity items. That puts it there. All right. Any other comments on this topic from the committee or mayor or staff? I'd say I guess there's no public involved. Any from any other attending council members? Councilmember Christensen's having flashbacks to planning commission again, as Joe will tonight. Anyway, let's move on to number 2, Northwest Railway Museum Roundhouse project update. Mr. Rogers, Councilmember Johnson, do you have a question, comment?
Yes, I just wanted to mention that, yes, Councilmember Christensen was very much involved in almost the entire process. She joined the council a little bit before I did, but was definitely there for most of those deliberations.
All right, Mr. Rogers.
All right, Northwest Railway Museum. So this is a picture of where the wetlands are next to the site. This is as you all know, this is the main issue we're dealing with. There's this large wetland B, which is mostly off-site. It extends to the south. And then there's this is the wetland of main concern, so-called wetland A. It lies between the Weber construction yard here and the Railway Museum's property, which sits here. The issue is that the proposed roundhouse would be built, roughly speaking, right in here, which, as you can see, is encumbered by wetland buffers. This has occurred because, first of all, the wetland has, in almost all likelihood, gotten larger since the Railway Museum's campus was originally envisioned about approximately 15 to 20 years ago. Back then, they were looking at buffers that were less than 100 feet. The buffers you're seeing here are 165 feet, which is in conformance with the current code. So what we have been doing is, first of all, we got the wetlands actually mapped instead of having them be kind of back of the napkin drawing. So we have good information now what we're doing is we've retained an outside consultant. The city has retained an outside consultant, that is Van Ness Feldman. Van Ness Feldman has done work for the city in the past, mostly planning related work, but some legal related work related to Snoqualmie Rig. They are assisting us, but in this case, with both planning and legal services, because they have attorneys and planners who have experience in working with situations like this, to help us identify ways we can work with the Railway Museum to still get the project built, even though it's, as you could see, we have to build the roundhouse pretty deep into a wetland buffer here potentially. Broadly speaking, the city's code would not allow that, but as with all things, there are ways to work with that and with the various state agencies involved in this. This is something that this expertise doesn't exist within the city staff. I don't have it. The city attorney doesn't have it. We've never been through a process like that. Van Ness Feldman has folks who have been through the process. So we're working with them closely to identify, now that we know where the wetlands are, what are our options and what would it involve to work through some of those options. So that in a nutshell is where we're at with them. Mr. Anderson, the executive director of the Railway Museum, is certainly aware of where we're at. He's seen this exact same map, and he has it as well for his use. So we're working closely with him to continue pushing this one forward.
Council members or mayor, any questions? Seeing no hands raised. I don't have any questions, Jason. I appreciate the update. I know it's a tough little topic because they want to move forward with it, and
Yeah.
The situation was different than I think was anticipated. So
Unfortunately, yes.
okay,
We'll get there.
certainly hope so. All right,
Actually, I do have just one quick thing.
go ahead, Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you. Is this project a quasi-judicial proceeding, and shall I treat it as such?
At this point, no, it's not. The project is highly unlikely to require any, or I should say, the project would not in all likelihood require any council decision permits. There may be some actions the council may or may not end up needing to take or wanting to take that would be discretionary, funding being one example of that. But when it comes to review processes for permits involved, they're either going to be administrative approvals or maybe they're a hearing examiner approval. So at this point, there's nothing to be concerned about from a quasi-judicial appearance of fairness standpoint. But thank you for asking. It's a good question.
Great, thank you.
Okay. No other questions or comments? Move on to the last item on regular business, which is the Community Development Committee priorities discussion. This is my mea culpa is this is my fault for not getting the list of our last I guess our last roundtable. About roundhouse, let's say roundhouse. That's why I had to pause there for a second. Our last roundtable with our city clerk, and didn't get the list prepared and out in terms of being updated. I know Deb's on vacation, and certainly hopefully enjoying that. So if we want to have a short discussion on maybe some of those priorities like we did a few weeks ago, I can pull up my list from, well, I guess it was almost a couple months ago now. We had a few meetings that were canceled. I almost don't want to get into those priorities yet until council's gotten further along with setting them. I think we have one more session, if I remember right, Mayor, is it next? No, next one's budget, and then we have after the next one. I believe we were talking about doing it as part of a regular council session.
It is not scheduled. It is not scheduled yet. There will be another priority coming up that we will be starting on next Monday, which is called the mill site.
Yeah, I've heard of it. Can't talk about it. So I think at this point, it's sort of in a, we're sort of caught in the middle. We haven't completed the council hasn't completed the discussion of priorities and action items. So it's hard for this committee to move forward with investigating some of those and trying to provide some background for council to continue and also almost in support of staff to give some clarity behind those priorities. Maybe if we let's do a quick another roundabout. We'll go around the horn and see if council members have something to add. We'll start with Councilor Naked.
Okay, so where I thought you were about to say was, are we okay with waiting till our next meeting to discuss this? And my answer is going to be yes, I am.
That's where I was headed with it. Councilmember Johnson, any concerns with that?
No, that sounds good for me. I am curious, is there any sort of update we can get on filling the community development director position? That's a priority for me.
That was going to be my last question. So we'll move off of number 3. That was going to be my last question for the mayor. If there is any update before we adjourn.
Well, yes. So actually, Councilmember Lissay was in the interview group with us, and there will be an announcement coming out, and confirmation next council meeting, and we've Ms. Archek, Emily, I can't say her last name, has accepted the position for community development director, and she has more than 26 years of local government community development experience, and currently serves as planning manager for City of Edgewood, Washington. She previously was a senior planner for cities of Issaquah and Sammamish. It was for Sammamish from year 2000 to 2018 during their fast growth. And she's assistant planner for City of Hillsboro, Oregon. She's a member of the Growth Management Coordinating Committee of Pierce County and has American Planning Association, so APA, and also American Institute of Certified Planners, so the AICP, and has a Master's of Urban Regional Planning. So she'll be joining us July 18th, and so might be at the July 11th meeting. I think she also has a council meeting at her current city, so we'll see how that works out. But I also want to state, we want to thank Jason Rogers for being the interim community development director since last fall, overseeing the day-to-day management and oversight of the community development department. And he brings such a wealth of knowledge in land use and comprehensive planning and zoning and shoreline master plan, the program. So we appreciate Jason's leadership during this time of transition. So again, we will be confirming next Monday night.
Well, that was more information than I was expecting. I would we'll have opportunity to talk about it at council, obviously, but Jason, you've been a big part of keeping the committee, the department, in some ways the development of the city going, and you have my utmost respect for that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We did a tribute to you this morning at leadership, but you were not there this morning.
Yes, I am in fact on vacation this week, but this is the second city meeting I've been in today. So my vacation's going pretty well, as you can tell.
Facts, not in evidence.
But thank you. And I am very much looking forward to the new director starting. It will lighten my load considerably. So.
Well, I will certainly applaud you at the next council meeting as well. And being that you are on vacation, I think unless there's any other items for this committee, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Let that man go.
Second.
All right, moving second. All in favor, of course, yes.
All right.
Thank you, everyone. Meeting is adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.